True strength isn't measured by age or appearance. Sometimes the quietest person in the room has lived through battles you can't imagine. Before we begin this remarkable journey, make sure to subscribe to USX Stories so you never miss these powerful tales of courage, sacrifice, and hidden heroes. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from today. The yellow school buses lined up in the parking lot of Riverside High School, engines rumbling in the early morning heat. Students clustered around their luggage, excited chatter filling the air as they prepare for the annual summer adventure camp at Lake Pine Ridge. For most of them, this was a highlight of their year. 2 weeks away from home, away from rules, away from everything familiar. Mrs. Eleanor Hayes stood near the lead bus, clipboard in hand, her gray hair pulled back in a simple bun. At 65 years old, she was the newest teacher at Riverside High, hired just 3 months earlier to teach history. This would be her first time chaperoning the summer camp, and the administration had paired her with the most challenging group, the senior class, known for their pranks, their attitude, and their complete disregard for authority. She wore a simple navy polo shirt and khaki pants, sensible shoes for the journey ahead. But it was her right hand that caught attention as she lifted her clipboard. A tattoo peeked out from beneath her sleeve, dark ink that looked like it might be a seal of some kind, though from a distance it was hard to tell. That was all it took. "Dude, check it out," whispered Jake Morrison, the captain of the football team, elbowing his friend Tyler. The old lady has a tattoo. "What is she, trying to be cool or something?" Tyler snorted, loud enough for others to hear. "Probably got it last week to relate to us kids. What's next? She gonna start vaping?" Laughter rippled through the group of students nearby. Smartphones appeared, cameras pointing discreetly in Mrs. Hayes' direction. $20 says she cries before we even get there," muttered Chloe Richards, the queen bee of the senior class, her perfectly manicured nails scrolling through Instagram. $50 says she quits by day 3, added Marcus Chun, leaning against the bus with practiced indifference. Mrs. Hayes heard the whispers. She always did, but her face remained calm, expression unchanged. She simply checked her clipboard one more time and called out in a steady voice, "Bus 1, please begin boarding. Keep your belongings organized and find your assigned seats." "Yes, ma'am, drill sergeant, ma'am," Jake called out in a mocking military voice, snapping a sloppy salute that sent his friends into fits of laughter. Mrs. Hayes didn't respond. She just watched as they boarded, one by one, their smirks and sideways glances following her like shadows. What they didn't know, what none of them could possibly know, was that Eleanor Hayes had heard worse, far worse, in places far more dangerous than a high school parking lot. But she said nothing. Not yet. The bus ride to Lake Pine Ridge took 4 hours. 4 hours of chaos that tested the patience of every adult on board. Students blasted music from portable speakers, threw paper balls across the aisle, and recorded TikTok videos while standing in their seats. Mrs. Hayes sat in the front row, hands folded in her lap, occasionally making notes on her clipboard. She didn't yell. She didn't threaten. She simply observed. "Yo, Mrs. Hayes," called out Jake from the back. "You ever been camping before, or is this going to be your first time seeing trees?" The bus erupted in laughter. "Yeah," added Chloe, "I heard old people need, like, special medical tents and stuff. You gonna be okay out there, or should we pack extra batteries for your hearing aid?" More laughter. Even the bus driver glanced in the rearview mirror, uncomfortable but unsure whether to intervene. Mrs. Hayes turned slowly in her seat. Her eyes, sharp and clear despite her age, swept across the rowdy students. For just a moment, the laughter died down. "I'll manage," she said simply, her voice quiet but carrying a weight that silenced the immediate area. "Thank you for your concern." Then she turned back around, and the moment passed. The students exchanged glances, unsure whether they'd been dismissed or defeated, and slowly the noise level rose again. But Tyler, sitting in the middle of the bus, leaned toward Jake with a frown. "Did you see her eyes, man? That was kinda intense." Jake waved him off. "Whatever, dude. She's just trying to act tough. Old people do that." Still, something in Mrs. Hayes' gaze had registered. Something that didn't quite match the image of a fragile, first-time camp chaperone. Camp Pine Ridge sprawled across 200 acres of forest and lakefront. Cabins dotted the hillside. A mess hall stood at the center, and trails wound through the woods like veins. The students piled off the buses, immediately complaining about the heat, the bugs, and the lack of cell phone signal. "This is literally the worst," groaned Chloe, swatting at a mosquito. "I can't even post my stories. How am I supposed to survive 2 weeks without Wi-Fi?" Mrs. Hayes directed students to their assigned cabins, her voice calm and clear over the chaos. "Boys' cabins 1 through 4, girls' cabins 5 through 8. Unpack your essentials first. Orientation begins in 1 hour at the mess hall." "Why don't you unpack for us, Mrs. Hayes?" called out Marcus, grinning. "You know, since you're so good at giving orders and stuff." "Yeah," added Jake, "give us the military experience. Make our beds with those perfect corners." The student around them laughed, and Mrs. Hayes simply nodded. 1 hour, everyone. Please be on time." As she walked away toward the counselor's cabin, she rolled up her sleeve slightly, just enough to reveal more of the tattoo on her right forearm. In the bright sunlight, it was clearer now, an intricate design that looked like an official military seal, surrounded by what appeared to be coordinates or numbers woven into the pattern. Tyler caught sight of it and nudged Jake. "Man, look at that ink. That's actually pretty detailed." Jake squinted. Probably fake. Old people get temporary tattoos at carnivals. But something about it looked permanent, professional, real. They shrugged it off and headed to their cabin, already planning the pranks they'd pull over the next 2 weeks. The first 3 days of camp were relentless. The students tested every boundary, pushed every limit, and made Mrs. Hayes their primary target. During the first morning hike, they lagged behind intentionally, forcing her to wait every few hundred yards. "Sorry, Mrs. Hayes," Chloe would call out sweetly. "These trails are just so hard on our young, healthy knees. Can't imagine how tough it is for you." During the canoe exercise, Jake and Marcus accidentally splashed her with lake water, soaking her clipboard and notes. "Oops. Sorry, Mrs. Hayes. Guess we're not as coordinated as trained professionals." At the campfire circle, students whispered and giggled whenever she spoke, making it impossible for her to lead the discussion she prepared about teamwork and leadership. But through it all, Mrs. Hayes remained composed. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't write anyone up. She simply continued doing her job with quiet, unwavering dignity. The other chaperones noticed. "Eleanor," said Mr. Patterson, the physics teacher, pulling her aside after dinner on the third night, "you don't have to take this. Those kids are out of control. We can report them, send some home if we need to." Mrs. Hayes shook her head gently. "They're just children, David. Testing boundaries is what children do. They're 18-year-old adults being cruel," he countered. "There's a difference." She smiled a sad, knowing smile. "I've dealt with worse." Mr. Patterson wanted to ask what she meant, but something in her eyes stopped him. Instead, he just nodded and walked away, leaving Mrs. Hayes standing alone by the lake, watching the sun set over the water. In the fading light, she rolled up her sleeve again and looked at the tattoo on her forearm. Her fingers traced the design absently, and for just a moment, her expression changed. The calm facade cracked, revealing something deeper: memory, pain, loss. Then she pulled her sleeve back down and returned to her cabin. The turning point came on the 4th day, during what was supposed to be a simple trust-building exercise. The camp director, a former park ranger named Tom Sullivan, had organized a rope course challenge in the forest. Students would work in teams to navigate obstacles, requiring communication, cooperation, and physical coordination. Mrs. Hayes stood with the other chaperones, observing as teams formed and students began tackling the course. Most groups struggled, arguing about strategy and blaming each other when things went wrong. Then Jake's team reached the final obstacle, a cargo net stretched 20 feet high between 2 platforms. The goal was for all team members to climb to the top and cross to the other side. "This is stupid," complained Chloe, staring up at the net. "Why do we even need to do this?" "Just climb," urged Tyler. "Let's get it over with." They started up, but halfway through, disaster struck. Marcus, showing off, tried to climb too quickly and lost his grip. He fell backward, hit the safety mat wrong, and immediately cried out in pain, clutching his ankle. Panic erupted. Someone get help. He's hurt. Where's the camp nurse? Students froze, unsure what to do. Mr. Patterson started jogging toward the main office, but it was a good 10-minute run from the rope course. Mrs. Hayes moved. She crossed the distance to Marcus in seconds, her movements precise and efficient. She knelt beside him, her hands already assessing the injury with practiced expertise. "Don't move," she said calmly. "Let me see." Marcus, pale and sweating, looked up at her with wide eyes. "It hurts really bad, Mrs. Hayes." "I know." Her voice was steady, authoritative. "I'm going to check for a break. This might hurt a bit, but I need you to stay still." Her fingers moved over his ankle with the confidence of someone who had done this 100 times before. She tested the joint, checked for swelling, assessed the range of motion. The students gathered around, silent now, watching. "It's not broken," she announced. "Severe sprain. We need ice, elevation, and compression. Someone get the first aid kit from the equipment shed. It's the red building near the mess hall. Now." Tyler took off running. Mrs. Hayes stayed with Marcus, her hand on his shoulder. "You're going to be fine. Keep breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. How do you know all this?" Marcus asked through gritted teeth. For the first time since arriving at camp, Mrs. Hayes' expression shifted. Something flickered in her eyes. Memory, perhaps, or regret. "I've had training," she said simply. Tyler returned with the first aid kit, and Mrs. Hayes went to work with remarkable efficiency. She wrapped the ankle, elevated it on a makeshift support, and applied ice with the precision of a field medic. Within minutes, Marcus's pain had decreased, his breathing steadied. The camp nurse arrived shortly after, huffing from the run. She looked at Mrs. Hayes' work and nodded approvingly. "Excellent treatment. You've clearly done this before." Mrs. Hayes didn't respond. She simply stood, brushed off her knees, and stepped back to let the nurse take over. The students stared at her with new eyes. This wasn't a fumbling old woman they'd expected to crumble under pressure. This was someone else entirely. "Mrs. Hayes," said Chloe slowly, "where'd you learn to do that?" Mrs. Hayes met her gaze. "The military teaches you many things." The words hung in the air like a bomb. "Wait," said Jake. "You were in the military?" "A long time ago," Mrs. Hayes replied. Then she turned and walked back toward the cabins, leaving the students staring after her in stunned silence. That evening, the atmosphere shifted. The mocking stopped. The jokes died away. Students gathered in small groups, whispering, questioning, wondering who exactly their elderly history teacher really was. Tyler pulled out his phone, searching desperately for any scrap of cell signal. "I'm telling you, there's something major we're missing here. Did you see how fast she moved?" Jake said, shaking his head, "Like, seriously fast. And that first aid stuff? That wasn't basic training. That was expert level." Chloe bit her lip, guilt creeping into her expression for the first time. "We've been really terrible to her." "Yeah," Marcus added from where he sat with his ankle elevated. "And she never once fought back, never yelled, just took it." In the counselor's cabin, Mrs. Hayes sat alone, writing in a worn journal by lamplight. The pages were filled with careful handwriting, dates going back decades. She paused, pen hovering over the paper, then closed the journal and set it aside. Tomorrow would bring more questions. She could feel it. But tonight, she simply sat in the quiet, her right hand resting on the table, the seal tattoo visible in the warm glow of the lamp. The revelation came on day 7, but not from Mrs. Hayes. A black SUV rolled into the camp early in the morning, dust trailing behind it on the dirt road. The vehicle parked near the main office, and a man in his late 40s stepped out. Military bearing, sharp eyes, close-cropped hair graying at the temples. He wore civilian clothes, but everything about him screamed veteran. Tom Sullivan, the camp director, greeted him with a handshake. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm looking for Eleanor Hayes," the man said, his voice carrying that clipped precision of someone who'd spent years giving orders. I was told she's chaperoning a school group here. She is, Tom confirmed, curious now. May I ask who's looking for her? The man smiled slightly. Tell her Colonel James Mitchell is here. She'll know who I am. Tom's eyebrows rose, but he nodded and sent a counselor to fetch Mrs. Hayes. Students, always curious, had noticed the SUV and drifted closer. Jake, Tyler, Chloe, and a dozen others hung back at a distance, watching. When Mrs. Hayes emerged from her cabin and saw Colonel Mitchell, she stopped in her tracks. For the first time since arriving at camp, emotion crossed her face. Surprise, followed by something that looked like old affection. "James," she said, walking toward him. "What are you doing here?" "I was in the area for a veteran ceremony," he replied. "Heard through the grapevine that Commander Hayes was at a summer camp nearby. Had to see it for myself." Commander. The word rippled through the watching students like electricity. Mrs. Hayes and Colonel Mitchell spoke quietly for a few minutes, too low for anyone to overhear. But their body language spoke volumes. The way he stood at attention when addressing her, the respect in his posture, the brief moment when he glanced at her right arm and nodded in recognition. Then, to everyone's shock, Colonel Mitchell stepped back and saluted. A crisp military salute, held steady. Mrs. Hayes hesitated, then returned it with equal precision, her movement sharp and practiced despite her age. The students watching felt their jaws drop. "What the hell?" whispered Tyler. When the salute ended, Colonel Mitchell spoke loud enough for others to hear, clearly intentional. "It's an honor to see you again, ma'am. The unit still talks about you. What you did, what you sacrificed, we don't forget." Mrs. Hayes' voice was quiet. "I was just doing my job, James. You saved lives, Commander. Dozens of them, including mine." He glanced at the gathered students, then back to her. "These kids have any idea who they're dealing with?" She shook her head. "They don't need to know." "Maybe they do," he said gently. Then louder, addressing the students directly. "Do you know what that tattoo on her arm means?" Silence. The students drew closer, unable to help themselves. Colonel Mitchell continued. "That's the insignia of the Navy SEAL Command. But Mrs. Hayes wasn't a SEAL. Women weren't allowed in that role during her service. She was something arguably more important. She was the intelligence commander who ran operations that saved countless lives in some of the most dangerous places on Earth." The students stared, mouths open. 23 years of service, Mitchell went on. Multiple deployments to war zones most people have never heard of. She coordinated rescue missions, tracked enemy combatants, and made calls that meant the difference between soldiers coming home or coming home in boxes. Mrs. Hayes' jaw tightened. "James, that's enough." But he wasn't finished. "That tattoo? She earned it. The SEAL teams gave it to her after she orchestrated a rescue that pulled 16 operators out of an ambush in Afghanistan. They were surrounded, outnumbered, minutes from being wiped out. Commander Hayes found them a way out, analyzed the rain, intercepted communications, called in air support with coordinates so precise that the enemy was neutralized and every single American made out alive. The silence was absolute. She took shrapnel from an explosion while coordinating that rescue from a forward operating base. Mitchell continued, his voice thick with emotion. Refused medical evacuation until every operator was accounted for. She's got scars you'll never see and nightmares she'll never talk about. And when she finally retired at 63, she did it quietly, with no fanfare, no demands for recognition. She just disappeared into civilian life. He turned back to Mrs. Hayes, his expression softening. "Finding out you became a teacher doesn't surprise me, ma'am. You always said the most important mission was preparing the next generation." Tears glistened in Mrs. Hayes' eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "Thank you, James. But these children don't need war stories. They need hope. They need to know what real strength looks like," he countered gently. "And it's standing right in front of them." With that, Colonel Mitchell saluted one final time, climbed back into his SUV, and drove away, leaving a camp full of stunned, silent teenagers in his wake. For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. Then Jake Morrison, the football captain who had mocked her from day one, stepped forward. His face was red, shame written across every feature. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, his voice cracking, "We're... God, I'm so sorry." Chloe followed, tears streaming down her face. "We didn't know. We were so awful to you. We're idiots," Tyler added, his voice thick. "Complete idiots." One by one, the students approached. Some apologized verbally. Others just stood there, unable to find words big enough to express their regret. Mrs. Hayes looked at each of them, her expression gentle. "You didn't know because I didn't tell you, and that was my choice. You're young. You made assumptions. We all do. But we were cruel." Marcus said from where he sat with his wrapped ankle. "You saved my life, well, my ankle, and before that we treated you like garbage." "You're children," Mrs. Hayes said simply. "You're supposed to make mistakes. The question is what you do after you realize you've made them." Jake straightened his shoulders. "We want to do better. We want to, I don't know, honor what you did, who you are." Mrs. Hayes smiled, and a real smile that transformed her face. "Then honor it by being kind, by looking deeper than appearances, by understanding that everyone you meet is carrying stories you know nothing about. The quietest person in any room might be the strongest. The oldest might be the wisest. The one you underestimate might be the one who saves your life someday." She paused, looking at each student in turn. "I didn't need you to know my past to deserve your respect. Every person deserves that, veteran or not. But I hope now you understand that strength isn't about being loud. It isn't about being young or strong or fearless. It's about showing up, doing what needs to be done, and treating others with dignity even when they don't return the favor." Chloe wiped her eyes. "Will you tell us more? About what you did?" Mrs. Hayes shook her head gently. "Some stories aren't mine alone to tell. They belong to people who didn't make it home, to families who still grieve, to missions that remain classified. What I can tell you is this. Service means sacrifice. It means putting others first. And it doesn't end when you take off the uniform. Every day, in every interaction, you choose whether to serve others or serve yourself." She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the full tattoo, the seal insignia surrounded by coordinates, dates, and symbols that told a story only certain people could read. "This reminds me of who I was," she said quietly. "But more importantly, it reminds me why I served. To protect people who couldn't protect themselves. To ensure that children like you could grow up in freedom, make mistakes, learn, and become better than the generation before." Tyler's voice was barely a whisper. "You're a hero." "No," Mrs. Hayes corrected firmly. "I'm a teacher. The heroes are the ones who didn't come home. I'm just someone who did her job and was lucky enough to survive it. Now I have a different job, helping you become the kind of people worth all those sacrifices." The remaining week of camp transformed completely. The students treated Mrs. Hayes with profound respect, but more than that, they listened. When she taught navigation skills, they paid attention. When she shared lessons about teamwork, they absorbed every word. When she led campfire discussions about leadership and integrity, you could hear a pin drop. Jake organized the other students to handle camp chores without being asked, specifically to ease Mrs. Hayes' workload. Chloe spent an evening teaching the younger campers about assumptions and kindness, using her own behavior as a cautionary tale. Tyler researched veterans organizations and started planning a school fundraiser for military families. On the final night, during the traditional closing ceremony where students share their favorite camp moments, the senior class did something unprecedented. They asked Mrs. Hayes to sit in the place of honor by the fire. Then, one by one, they stood and spoke. "I learned that strength is quiet," said one student. "I learned that respect is earned through character, not demands," said another. "I learned to look deeper," said Chloe. "I learned that service never really ends," said Jake. When they finished, they stood together and, with surprising coordination, saluted Mrs. Hayes in unison. 18 teenagers offering the deepest respect they knew how to give. Mrs. Hayes stood, tears finally falling freely down her cheeks. She returned the salute, her hand steady despite her emotion. "Thank you," she said simply. "You've given me hope for the future, and that's the greatest gift any teacher can receive." The buses rolled back into Riverside High School's parking lot 2 weeks after they'd left. But the students who climbed off weren't the same ones who boarded. They carried their luggage with more care. They spoke to each other with more kindness. And when they said goodbye to Mrs. Hayes, it was with genuine affection and respect. "See you in class, Mrs. Hayes," said Jake, shaking her hand formally. "Thank you for everything," said Chloe, impulsively hugging her. "You changed my life," Tyler said simply. Mrs. Hayes watched them go, her clipboard held loosely in her hand, her tattoo visible in the afternoon sun. She had served her country for 23 years in uniform. Now she was serving in a different way, shaping minds, touching hearts, and teaching the next generation what real strength looked like. As the last bus pulled away and the parking lot emptied, Mrs. Hayes walked her car alone. She opened the door, then paused, looking back at the school building. Tomorrow, she would return to teaching history. But today, she had made history, the kind that doesn't appear in textbooks but lives in the hearts of those who experience it. She smiled, climbed into her car, and drove home, carrying with her the knowledge that sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought with weapons. Sometimes they're fought with patience, dignity, and the quiet strength to be exactly who you are, no matter who's watching. Moral: true strength doesn't shout for attention. It serves quietly, endures patiently, and teaches through example. The person you underestimate might be the hero you never knew you needed. Look deeper. Respect everyone. And remember that service to others is the highest calling, whether in uniform or in a classroom. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to USX Stories for more powerful tales of courage, sacrifice, and the heroes who walk among us unrecognized. Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments what this story meant to you. Until next time, treat everyone with the respect they deserve. You never know what battles they fought to be standing beside you.